Wonderful. Thank you everyone for your patience while the tech stuff got resolved. It is 6:03, so I'm going to call the WSESD board meeting to order. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and to participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. I do have just a couple changes to the agenda before we move along. I'm going to move the executive session that's noted as A to at the beginning of the administrative report. Okay. So then B, that's going to, it would be in regards to the board vacancy. That's being postponed based on the not having currently having a candidate to, for the board to vote on. So we're going to postpone that for a time in the future when that is necessary. I'm also going to postpone number C, executive session, and that may be come back onto the agenda in August, at one of the meetings in August. So are there any motions to amend the agenda?
So moved. Oh, no. Well, you just made the motions.
I amended it based on
What we know.
being able to
Right.
amend it, but I didn't know if anybody else had any other amendments that they felt needed to be made. Okay, so then we'll move on. Student matters, 5 to 10 minutes. Are there any students in the online who would like to share with the board questions, comments? I imagine most students are probably not thinking of school at the moment. They're probably thinking of their summer. So I'm going to ask a second time. No students? And okay, we're moving on then. Thank you very much. We are now going to the administrative report. Are you ready to do the executive session now, or did you want to do? Okay.
You can do it now, yeah.
Okay. So, okay, then I'm going to ask for a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage. And under a separate motion, there will be a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A3, the appointment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, provided that the public body shall make a final decision to hire or appoint a public officer or employee in an open meeting and shall explain the reasons for his final decision during the open meeting. Is there a motion for that finding?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. All those in favor of that finding, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. So now I ask for a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A3, the appointment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, provided that the public body shall make a final decision to hire or appoint a public officer or employee in an open meeting and shall explain the reasons for its final decision during the open meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. All those in favor of going into executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. And I should actually indicate that we are inviting Mark and
Hannah Parker
Hannah Parker
and Michael Kelleher.
and Michael Kelleher into the executive session. So we are in executive session at 6:08, and After that, we will move on with our meeting. So we hope to be very quick. So we are back from executive session at 6:35. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kristen's not in the office right now. We don't get to use their cell phone.
Hannah.
Okay. Sure.
Is it possible to?
She muted herself.
Okay, great, okay. So now we are going back to Mark for the rest of the administrative report.
Okay, so I'm just gonna give some updates tonight.
Kelly, you're muted.
Oh, Kelly, you were muted, I guess.
Okay, so in case no one heard, we came back from executive session at 6:35. Thank you for letting me know that you couldn't hear us. And we are now, there was no action to be taken from that executive session. And we are now moving back to Mark for the rest of the administrative report.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Just an update on some of the summer programming taking place throughout the summer. We have our school district elementary summer camp currently ongoing at Academy School. And that's a combination of academics, tutoring, and enrichment. At Putney Central and Dummerston, we have a similar collaborative happening at the Putney campus. At the middle school here on this campus, we have beams in operation through BAMS. And at BUHS, we've had a number of opportunities for kids for credit recovery, high school volunteers at all of our camps, a summer theater program, and some enrichment classes. So lots going on throughout the school district this summer.
What is credit recovery? Can you talk about that?
Students who need to, who didn't achieve the credit during the school year, so an opportunity to recover that credit in the summer.
They're being taught by somebody?
Yes.
Oh.
So that's just a general update. We can certainly present more in-depth presentation of what these programs look like early in the fall, and would want to do that. There's a question around using schools as shelters in collaboration with the Red Cross. As you all know, we've had a ton of rain this summer. We've had some flooding. We haven't had to do that. The last time we did do that was the final winter storm of this past school year, where school was shut down for 3 consecutive days. Just to give you a sense of how that works is first responders, typically the fire chief, will contact me, ask about using the high school in this case, and we use Putney as well. And we have that collaboration that sets up a larger meeting with representatives from the Red Cross, the police department, and state officials. During that time, we put together kind of a plan for how we can accommodate the community and still potentially run school at the same time, which is what we did not have to do this winter, but have in the past. That then turns to a collaboration of myself, school officials, school administrators, school maintenance team, in some cases, technology team. And then we work collaboratively with Red Cross, who takes the lead in this situation, with first responders, and put together a program to support the community as quickly as we possibly can. So that is the process. Once we have a site established as a shelter, we're very clear about the spaces and the parameters of the school, and Red Cross takes on supervision and ownership of those spaces and running those programs.
So is this a new thing? It didn't come out of Irene, did it?
This is in place for a number of years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So BUHS is a Red Cross site. I believe Vernon Elementary School, Putney Central will be used this winter. I think Guilford may be. So those are the schools with generators that can support community during
Can I,
harsh weather
can I ask you, how is
conditions.
it publicized? It's, I appreciate hearing the locations, but in the event of, thinking back to when we had that terrible storm and the trees were down and whatnot, and it was challenging to try and communicate that we were canceling the board meeting.
Yes.
So how is this communicated so people in an emergency would then be able to easily access the information?
That's a great question. A variety of public statements. I know this past example, I did a robocall to all of our families. We connected with local radio stations to make announcements. Red Cross would make announcements as well on their platforms. Signage around the town would go up. People would actually be assigned to different spaces in the town to direct people who were struggling. It's a pretty impressive deal that's put together in like a half an hour meeting, which then leads to a series of check-ins and follow-ups throughout the process.
Thank you.
Yep. I wanted to give an update on the Oak Grove project. I'll turn that one over to Frank.
Okay, yeah, so regarding the PCB project, we've reported on over since this time last year when the state indicated they wanted to start testing and then providing us with guidance. As you know, we went out to bid in April and May and awarded the abatement contract to Alloy Incorporated. They are a PCB and asbestos abatement firm. And then also the All Seasons Construction Company was awarded the bid for the windows. So that work is underway now. If you drive by the Oak Grove School, you'll see the scaffolding out there and the isolation of those spaces. The work is underway. We do expect the abatement to be finished by the end of this month, and then the new windows to go in following that. And everything indicates that project's on track. So we expect it to be done by September 1st. I'm also working with the Agency of Ed after the legislature finally passed the budget. And $13 million was set aside for reimbursement to schools that are doing what we're doing. So I will be pursuing that. It hasn't really been mapped out exactly what the path is to access the funding, but I'm working with the Agency of Ed. They've really been set back with the flooding issues. So they've redirected resources temporarily to that effort, but I'm confident that we will be reimbursed. Tim?
Has every school in the district been tested for PCBs?
It's on a state schedule, and Green Street has been tested, and Hip Hip Hooray, it's been officially declared PCB free, and that's the only other school that's gone through the state process.
So we're still at risk that a school might test too high and
To be
we'll have to
determined.
redo
Yep.
the infrastructure.
Yeah.
If you are able to secure some of this funding if we haven't tested the other schools, will we be able to go, is this a funding you get it now and you don't ever get any more?
It's statewide. For example, the city of Burlington High School is going through this process, and the total award for the state was about $29 million, and 16 of it is going to Burlington, and 13 is for the rest of the whole state. So it's totally underfunded. But at this point, it's just the very beginning of schools going through the testing process. So, if that's all the action the legislature took was to fund $13 million for the other 265 schools, it would not be a good scenario. We are the absolute earliest in the line for this work, so we're likely to be able to get reimbursement
do you think, I'm just thinking about this other schools, I see Paula, just a moment. If you see the other schools, if one or multiple other schools need some of this attention, do you see that in the future there would be additional funding, or are we looking at,
Yeah, it's totally up to the legislature. So
Okay.
I'm optimistic that this system is in a very good position because my understanding is we are the first school after Burlington High School to be in line for accessing the money. That's one reason why I can't do it right now, because they haven't set up the application process. We are the early adopters. I'm really pleased that we are going to totally eradicate PCBs out of the Oak Grove School in a few days, and unfortunately we can't create our own testing schedule. I would have done it weeks and weeks ago if I could, but the Department of Environmental Conservation, that's under the Agency of Human Services in Vermont, essentially say you have to submit a work plan that has to be approved, and then once that's done, they take over the testing labs and all of the science in terms of verifying what the conditions are. We are at their mercy in terms of schedule.
so we'll keep our fingers crossed that none of the other schools have any. Just to say, Paul, you had.
I think Ruby had her hand up as well, and
I
Jody has a hand up. Jody Normando has a hand up.
I'll let you go first, and then we'll.
So Jody,
Hi, Jody Normando, and I don't know whether this is the place to do it, but I wanted to follow up on a question I asked at the last board meeting a month ago. And I did hear from Mark, but not with the answer. And he said that he would have the answer to the number of people that the fire code would allow in the gymnasium. And I'm asking before the administrative report finishes, if Mark has that answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer it right now, Jody. 1,000 people,
Wow. Which building is
the gymnasium at the high school.
it?
Thank you for that question, Jody. Ruby?
So I have a question because I have kids who are at PCS at Putney Central School, and at the end of June, we got an email from John Sessions, the principal, that there was going to be we would be getting a letter and there was going to be PCB testing. So my assumption was that meant that we were in the testing cycle, but Frank, it sounds like you're saying that's not the case. And so I'm just wondering what the cycle.
Yeah, all
what
of
the
our
cycle
schools
is.
are in the cycle. We just haven't been notified of the timetable. But our system is in their cycle, and we have asked to schedule it as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And
And when you say that cycle, are we talking about like within the next 2 years, the expectation is that they're all going to come up for testing? Okay.
And my impression, Ruby, is I'm not sure about this, but I got a similar letter from the state saying we were gonna be,
Okay.
so, and to notify
Parents.
parents, so.
Okay. Thanks.
You have a question?
No. I was
Apparently it was
saying that-
imminent.
Yeah, we want this behind us so that we can continue with our capital plan, and it would be really problematic if we moved ahead or couldn't replace items that we know need to be replaced because the state has a schedule that they haven't shared with us. So we're pushing them to test our systems.
Thank you, Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Just a couple more. In terms of rebranding at the high school, embracing the new mascot, the Bears, it's quite an undertaking. The fact that we address this policy so efficiently put us in a really good place this summer to do that work, which has been headed up by the administration and maintenance department, athletic department. So I'll turn it over to Hannah to talk a bit about the work being done this summer so that when the students come back in the fall, it's an environment that embraces school spirit and a new mascot. So if you heard that, Hannah, can you talk a
Yep,
little
I'm
bit? Okay.
I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So yeah, we, Ricky Aether and Chris Sawyer and I walked around with someone who specializes in this type of work, and we took notes and sent him a spreadsheet of all the different areas of the building we had conversations about in terms of like how to kind of get a wish list estimate of what it would cost to do the work. Some of it, obviously, cafeteria, the gymnasium, entrances, both at the front entrance and the bus loop. There's some like exterior buildings with or the old exterior of the building that's within the building hallway where there's windows that currently have paper over them, and just how we could like utilize spaces like that to improve the look of the building while also allowing for kind of more school spirit around the new mascot. And yeah, I think and so right now we're kind of just waiting for him to get that information together for us. I emailed him earlier today and he said he's very close. So hopefully we should have more information soon.
Hannah, can you just explain, the person that met with you, Chris, and Ricky was like a branding consultant, or what kind of professional, what kind of profession person are you talking about?
To be honest, Mark was the connection for us with him. So I would rather Mark share kind of where that person came from.
Does expertise in rebranding, and he's a graphic designer who helped put together the various images that we will use.
And I will say he's done work on local colleges and stuff like that as he was walking around. He was sharing kind of different ideas of things that he's put in place recently.
Just trying to figure out how to word that in the minutes.
So in keeping with the policy on school branding and mascots, I move that the board approve the Bears as the BUH mascot.
And the icon.
I thought we did.
The mascot, we did school branding. We did school branding, which was removing the kernels. The mascot is the icon that we're talking about, which was not brought up.
Wasn't there a vote on it at the meeting that Eva did that presentation?
Yeah.
That Eva had, not that Eva.
It was the branding.
It was the branding, it was the use of kernels. We didn't have a mascot at the time.
So there was a student that presented that they had chosen the Bears, and didn't the board vote on
And we
that?
did vote on that.
Yes,
So since
that was the
voting,
last board meeting.
since voting on the new name, we've worked with a graphic designer to design images that reflect the name.
So I think what we're talking,
So my understanding is to make the distinction between, I thought the resolution, and I don't have it in front of me right now, I thought the resolution had to do with very specifically school branding. I don't recall the Bears coming up at that time. Maybe it did.
Yes, because the student discussed why they had come up with the name the Bears.
Bears, okay.
Just with their intelligence and the different things, the descriptions that they had come up with.
so do you have an actual image that you are coming to the board with?
We have multiple images.
So how are you coming to determine which image you would like to use? How is that process happening?
Again, we hired a professional graphic designer to help us. Go ahead, Hannah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in conversations with a graphic designer who created a bunch of different options that kind of are similar to each other, but a little different, it allows for a little more flexibility depending upon what it's being used for. and what's going to work for that particular like apparel item or sign or paper emblem or whatever it is. And so it just allows for a little bit of flexibility with the same mascot being used.
So under the circumstances, for now, I withdraw my motion.
Okay. I just looked up, it was the meeting from June 13th.
Right.
It was announced, we hereby recommend that the Board of School Directors officially adopt bears as our new school mascot and identifier for the purpose of enabling a unified and spirited school community. There was a motion by KP to approve, there was discussion, and then it was carried unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, will you be bringing us some images to at some point to?
There's an,
I emailed you some images a while back.
So do
May I ask about that? And I feel like we actually have had this conversation at the board level before, because I remember seeing the images and I think we talked about them. But I guess the question I have is, what's the process by which you're seeing those images being finalized? Like, you had someone walking through and talking about branding and what will be on the windows and the walls and things like that, and you're gonna have like reprinted t-shirts and things like that. There were many options, there were variations. Are you thinking you're using all of them? Are you going to be honing in on some of them? And what's the process by which you do that?
I think like Hannah just said, we'll use all of them based on what works best with the item we're using it on. We'll use it on a pen, essentially.
And can I?
A letterhead, a sign. Go ahead, Hannah.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I've already used 2 different items, like based on what the needs were. Like if you look at the school website right now, we switched out the kernels and added the bears. We also had kind of an emblem that had our 4 core values that surrounded it, that had kernels written at the bottom with a shield in the center. And we've replaced the word kernels with the word bears. And then we've added a bear to the middle instead of the shield and the stars. So like situations, I mean, those are just 2 examples of different ways that we've been using it right now.
But the fact that we collaborated and went through such an efficient process with the board in making the decision has allowed the administration and the school to really do some unique work to get us ready to start the new school year with a completely, hopefully, knock on wood, new look for the students. Okay, lastly, Panorama update. So I've asked Paul to give kind of a quick summary review of our June data. Our February presentation was also shared with the board, that was given by a combination of me, Chris Overtree, and Paul on February 28th.
Just want to get that up real quick.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as Mark noted, this is an update. As you recall, we had a presentation in February. Chris Overtree was part of that presentation. One of the things I wanted to do, actually, let me get that out of the way so you can see a little bit better. There, that's better. One of the things I did want to do was make a connection to the sort of back to that presentation in February, and the first couple of slides here are really just recapping that. Let's see if I can convince it to go. Over there. What Chris noted at the time, school climate problems usually reflect those occurring in society and our communities, except in extreme circumstances, school climate problems are not caused by schools or by children. That doesn't mean we can't work on them, but we need to sort of keep that in perspective as we move forward to work on the school climates. We use data to develop strategies that create tipping points that promote positive changes. And it's a collaborative project. We want to include diverse group of students, principals, teachers, community, and looking at the data, collect the data, identify key issues, and move forward with implementation plans. And so that's sort of setting the frame, and I'm sort of dancing through this fairly quickly because really what I want to get to is what are the updates. I'm perhaps a little reluctant to do that because the updates aren't as positive as we would have wanted them to be, but it's still important information and it still makes, sort of moves us to action in particular ways. This is climate survey trends for grade, as you recall, Panorama surveys are broken into grades 3 to 5 and 6 to 12. Oh, thank you so much. No, not this section. Thank you. All right. 3 to 5 and 6 to 12. So it bridges some of our elementary schools that are K-6 elementary schools. And so in some cases, there's a small sample size for a given school. But this is district level data, all of our 3rd through 5th graders. For the period spring 21 administration of the survey, fall 21, spring 22, fall 22, and spring 23. In the 3 main areas that we look at, each of those areas has questions associated with them. School climate, student sense of belonging, and the custom questions. Those questions are those that actually have historically been used in climate surveys prior to us moving to Panorama. So we actually, for some of those, we have 10 or 12 years of data at least for some of those questions. This is just the most recent when we put them all together in Panorama. And you can see there has been a steady decline in, with a few exceptions, in the 3 areas over the course of the administration. Rob?
So the category that says custom is just all the questions that were not about school climate and sense of belonging. What are the questions about?
More specific, and I can show you what those questions are. More specifically, they are questions that we wanted that were in the older student climate surveys from pre-Panorama that we wanted to include for the sake of continuity. And you'll see when you look at the questions, the topic of the questions, there's some overlap, but they're really important ones like kids at my school are kind to each other. That's one that we have paid attention to for a long time and we feel like is a real important indicator, but it wasn't in the pool, or a similar question, in the pool of normed questions that Panorama has made available to us. So when you see some of the comparisons, you'll see in some cases we can compare to national norm data, and for the custom questions we can't, right? It's almost like a 2-part survey. The Panorama piece that deals with school climate and sense of belonging, and then a parallel piece that looks at some other questions that also have to do with school climate and belonging, but are phrased a little differently.
I see.
Okay. And then for 6 to 12, slightly different pattern, but essentially some declines. We were really hoping to see, as a result of the efforts over the past several years, particularly this past year, some increase in those numbers, and we're not seeing that. Now, Chris would say it's not about the increases or decreases. It's really about just asking the questions, listening to the responses, and responding. So I'm sort of, I'll keep doing the presentation. We have some indication of things perhaps flattening out for those custom questions for 612, but for now, I think there's sort of a kind of a single message, and I'll get to that, but I'll preview it by saying we still got work to do. We are still responding to interruptions, disruptions, and we still have work to do. Here are disaggregations by race ethnicity for school climate. These 3 race ethnicity categories were the 3 that had sufficient sample size to report. So Black African American students in the blue, multiracial in the red, white students in the yellow. Gold. And then that's for grades 3 to 5. And then for grades 6 to 12, what's interesting here is a significantly higher response rate for those custom questions than for the nationally normed questions. I think we'd have to dig a little bit closer to really understand why that is. We don't have, as I said, for those custom questions, we don't have the national norm data to compare to.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? So in those charts, the percentage is how many people responded?
And thank you for asking that question because it's a really important question. What Panorama does is provide percentages of favorable responses.
Got it.
And the favorable responses are only the top two, or in a few questions that kind of reverse in the bottom two categories.
Okay.
They don't ever include the middle category. For some of the questions, for my money, if it's a relatively neutral response, I'm going to treat that as a sort of, it feels to me like I could see that as potentially positive, at least not a negative response.
Mm-hmm.
But Panorama doesn't do it that way. So these percentages are just the top two response categories.
Okay, thank you.
And then we can look at school level results. I've got it in two ways. I'll get to that spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is linked here. It's got a little bit more information. But generally speaking, what you've got, and I'll stand up to do this because it's a little hard to interpret. So school is over here, and you'll see, for instance, the elementary schools have a category for 3rd through 5th grade and a category for 6th grade. Similarly, Oak, Green Street, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, Vernon. And then BAMS, because it only has grades in the 6 through 12 category, is one band, BUHS similarly, and then the district 3rd through 5th grade results and 6th through 12th grade results. There really isn't any way to glom all those results together without going all the way back to the get-go and just lumping, and in some cases they're slightly different questions, and at least Panorama kind of frowns on it. Tim, you had a question.
Yeah, this data obviously is very important because you use it for continuous improvement plan. Therefore, shouldn't we make a huge effort to get a better response rate? Looking at BUHS, for example, that's 429. Those are the respondents, right?
There was a conscious decision to just poll the 9th and 10th graders this year, not the 11th and 12th graders.
Oh.
So this is only the 9th and 10th graders.
Oh, why is that?
I'm not exactly sure that I'll let the BUHS administrators respond to that, but I think that there was some discussion about that and that they really felt like they would get stronger, sort of a clearer picture with just the 9th and 10th.
But then even Oak Grove, if you look at grades 3 through 5, that's less than 50%. That's like 41%, I think, of the 100 and something students at Oak Grove. How do they do it with 3rd graders? Do the 3rd graders actually read and fill out a survey?
Sit down in front of the computer with the teacher, and the teacher talks about there's a script that's provided, and the teacher talks about the questions, and can sort of walk around and help the students provide that. There's a link that's that the students have. They do it at school.
But yeah, the data is important, which is why I think that the board needs to get this data, all of the data for each item at the same time as the principals. Can't it just be released to the board at the same time you give it to the principals?
I don't see any reason why not. There's some, this is my work, this isn't Panorama's work, putting these together. The slides, the graphs. What you can get immediately from Panorama is the PDF of the say the district level results at the school level. Because
the board, like you, we make decisions based on data-driven decisions. The board does. We all do. That's the way it should be. So the more information we have, the more specific the information, I think the better. And not only for Panorama Climate, but you also do Panorama Teacher Survey?
Teacher Perception of Student Survey.
And the Youth Risk Behavior.
That's done separately. And by the way, thank you for mentioning that. We finally have the 2021, the winter 2021 results from the YRBS.
Because these are enormously important, I think, for the board. And I can't speak for the entire board, but I'd say that we need that data to make decisions.
I agree with you in a lot of ways, Tim, but one of the things that I think is important is seeing this data and hearing the interpretation through the staff who are I can see that spreadsheet, and I think the value in me seeing it is hearing from Paul and hearing his interpretation and his filtering, which I think in your mid presentation, but I think that I have appreciated the cycle, the consistency with which you are doing reach outs to the leadership councils, you're presenting an update on the, I think that that's a step towards what I think, Tim, I'm hearing from you, we need data to make decisions, and this is a big part of it.
And, well, for example, when we see that we're in the 10th percentile for a particular item, like 3 to 5 climate, sense of belonging, what, I can't think of it specifically, but there's a lot of 10 percentiles. What that means is that 90% of everybody else in the nation who did this survey scored more favorably than we did. That's a red flag. I want to know.
No, I think you're misunderstanding the numbers on this. Can
The
you
10%.
explain what the percentages mean? Because that wasn't how I understood it.
This is, Tim is more or less correct. You'll notice that these percentages are all fall in the decades, or they're all some. It's clear that this is an estimate of where our results are with respect to national norm results, but Tim's correct, 10% ain't nothing to be proud about. That's a concern. We need to address that.
Well, just clarity on the timeline. Am I correct that this survey was administered with students up until the end of school? The window closed really like the week before school ended. And so just to clarify that timeline of the annual survey and then getting it back and then
Yeah, I mean, we've just barely gotten those by the end of school. We're sort of, I think, based on discussions with Chris that were had here, I think his recommendation would be, do it once a year. Do it mid-year, take your time to assess the results, look at what next steps you want to take, and then do that on a cyclical basis. As I say, his point is, looking at the data and responding to it is sort of the act of looking at the data is the important piece. Engaging the community and discussing it is the important piece, not necessarily the absolute numbers. Robin.
Going back to what Tim was mentioning before about who took these surveys, was there, besides the decision to only give it to the 9th and 10th graders at the high school, was there any other groups where there was a decision to not give it to all the students? I'm just noticing some other numbers that seem off to me, like only 18 6th graders took it at Academy. That's like a third of the grade.
Right. I can, we put the survey out there. Invariably, there's something that happens that prevents that. I can
Like they all went
do
on
the
a field trip that
reminders,
day or something like that.
or there was a field trip or something that was interfering.
The fact that only 18 did take it is relevant, and that is information that we need to use to address at future climate surveys. That is not the case.
Yeah, we need to get sample size. Yeah, for sure. Eva.
I have 2 questions. So with the Panorama survey, did we look at themes of wordings? So if there was like a word, it could be a feeling or an emotion that kept coming up, looking at the different wording and saying, okay, this word's coming up a lot, to sort of narrow down what that emotion these students are feeling, having these categories of themes.
These are not open response items. These are
Okay.
selected response items. So we're not actually getting the ability to do that text crunching to pull out the themes.
To do. And then the second question I have is, you had mentioned that there had been programs and there had been initiative to actually get the numbers up, and that it might not have been effective. One thing I would be interesting is if with these programs, if there would be a way to see, okay, when we do this goes up. So this program is effective, or this is effective. So that we're not just, you can have so many different programs, but they might not necessarily be effective for like one specific school, might need something a little bit different. So I'm wondering if there's a way to see how effective, if there's like a big jump when we introduce a specific program or.
Yeah. Absolutely, and to me, that's the heart of action planning.
Mm-hmm.
That is to say, proposing an action, identifying some long-term goal outcomes and some short-term sort of performance measures or input measures to track your progress, and seeing whether the activities that you're doing have an impact. For me, one of the real big items has been the social workers that we've had working in all of the schools. And we can measure the number of social workers that we've hired, but it's really hard to get at other, at least from where I can see, to get at some of the other interim data that might tell us progress. I mean, hiring social workers is a big thing that should have a big impact, but measuring, in the short term, measuring that impact is kind of hard to do.
Do you have, so I'm thinking back a few slides where you had the grades 3 to 5. And I think it was the one before that where you were that one right. No, back one more, maybe?
That's 6 to 12.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, right there, thank you. So where you were talking about the current one being lower on each of the previous, from the fall to now. Do you have a sense of what it is? And I guess I have that question, but I'm wondering if maybe also the high school, were the 11th and 12th graders not selected because they may have had some COVID experience from COVID that might have influenced the survey and may not have given as good of a reading as the 9th and 10th graders? And is there something related here, or is there something else that you can say that you think might be?
I can see a little bit.
Sure.
It's kind of a weird question.
One of the things I'd like to point out is when you look at the spring of 2021, that school year experience was entirely different from any other school year our students have experienced, except for the spring of 2020, obviously. But 2021 data, we had kids attending school in person 2 days a week, and then attending school remotely 3 days a week. We had students attending school remotely 5 days a week. At the high school, we had kids on campus 1 day a week. So we had developed remote schools. We had combined schools to develop remote schools. We had Monday, Tuesday in-person schools, Thursday, Friday in-person schools. So it's just night and day compared to like last year versus just 2021.
I think in responding to your question, another piece of it was, no, there was no conscious, we can't have the 11th and 12th graders take it. My suspicion, I won't speak for the high school administration, my suspicion is that it was largely to do with logistics. It's a lot easier when you kind of tend to have all of your 9th and 10th graders together in these classes that can administer the survey, and the 11th and 12th graders are all over the shop.
I think I did see Hannah's name. Show up.
Is Hannah, you wanna jump in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't remember being part of a conversation, so I can't speak to why the 9th and 10th graders were chosen and not the 11th, 12th. But I did want to just echo what Mark said. And during the spring of 2021, I was an elementary school counselor. And I can tell you that like the gratitude and love for students to be back in the buildings and feel that support, I think is like shown tremendously here. And then a steady decline just allowed for kind of the sense of normalcy of school to start taking play again. And so like getting that blue year back would be awesome. But I do think there was definitely like a piece of that was just by students just being so happy to be back in the building.
So is that, my understanding that you're saying that might have been sort of artificially inflated at that point? The blue line might have been sort of...
From what I saw in my schools that I was working in at the time, I would say yes.
Okay.
Like it's kind of like when you don't see someone for a really long time and you just feel so much like gratitude for seeing them. And then you see them for a long time and it kind of wears off a little bit. It's just that kind of like enthusiasm and excitement for just being together again.
Thank you, that's helpful.
I was just gonna say, I think that spring 2021 actually was when we returned to 4 days in person at the grades 3 to 5 level. So that kind of aligns with what Hannah is saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if the data's inflated, but that's what the data was at that moment in time.
Well, I didn't mean inflated on purpose, I meant just that the data, that,
Higher.
sort of, what, how to say.
One thing I was gonna point out
Good
that
question.
I've noticed is if you look, the fall results are generally better than the spring in multiple years. I think just September or early October, whenever we give it out, it's sometime pretty early in the year. I think everybody's a little more upbeat and then when we take it in June, everybody's tired and whatever's on kids' minds in that moment, the timing of when we give it, I think is impactful too. Whether it's right before break or right after a break or
That's
some fun
helpful to have,
assembly.
to try and keep things in
I
perspective.
think there are things that factor into the timing.
Lots of variables.
I have two comments. The trends charts, I think it would be helpful to see, sometimes you have like bar graphs that there's a line above it that shows, it would be helpful to somehow see national trends, how we're, in a visual format. It just a comment. And then I guess I just wanted to express my concern about the decision, and it may have been at the administrative level, to only survey two of the grades at the high school, because I think if we think about trends going forward, is it always going to be just two grades and an inconsistent number of grades? It just feels like an unfortunate decision, and I question whether or not it should be there should be a little bit more control over that. And one other question, not comment, but you seem to say that Chris Overtree suggested doing the climate survey once a year. Did I misunderstand that? Rather than doing it at the beginning?
That was my understanding from Chris, yeah.
So I appreciate although I hear what's been said about like the beginning of the year, like there's happiness, and the end of the year there's just tired, and so that could be reflected in the survey results. It's nice to see within a year some benchmark, kind of like how did it start and where did we go. It'd be interesting to hear a rationale from you or from Chris at some point about if we move to once a year, how are we reflecting on changes within the year, or are we just not anymore?
I think Chris would say, don't perseverate on changes within the year. I think his point is, it's about asking the questions and engaging with people. It's not about numbers. That was just my impression, and in some ways, I get that. I mean, I want the numbers to increase, don't get me wrong.
The energy should really be on the initiatives, the action steps, the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis to improve the environment.
For those, I'm gonna jump in, for those that had the question, I'll provide the board with a copy of the survey, but this is my shorthand, this is the spreadsheet that's linked in the presentation. This is my shorthand for the questions, the climate questions, about the positive or negative energy of the school. It's a question about fair or unfair rules. Behavior of other students helps me or hurts me. Teachers are excited to be teaching. Those are the climate questions. Sense of belonging questions, people understand me as a person. I get support from adults, I get respect from other students, I feel like I belong. And then the custom questions, if you were upset, how concerned would your teacher be? When asked, how are you, does the teacher really want to know? Do I feel respected by adults? Is there at least one trusted adult I can go to? Kids are kind to each other. Do I feel safe at school? My principal cares about me. I feel safe on the school bus. So as I say, there are these two pieces. These are the nationally normed questions. These are the questions that we've asked for a long time. And I think having both of them is important. The picture that I get and what I said in February, I'm still feeling like I'm digging into the results. I feel like what the message that I'm getting is that there are still kid-to-kid interactions that are problematic. And that's part of what's driving the decline. The socialization of children in the school district from K to 12 still needs some work. And that's kind of to me, that leads us straight into questions about the action plan and what we want to do with the action plan for the
Paul, can I make a quick comment? I think it's important to note also that obviously kids in schools are not this isolated incident. And so I think part of these, and not to excuse the results at all, we want to do everything we can to be supporting children and students in schools. And it's important also to recognize that these numbers are also a reflection of the microcosm of our greater society. And it's not like you just go to school and take a climate survey and those are the results. And so when I'm looking at the results too, I'm thinking about what is the layering here with our society in general and the types of things that you're talking about in terms of social supports and work with families and the outreach that schools are doing, and how do we really think creatively about wraparound services? Because a student doesn't come to third grade and take a climate survey about certain items without being affected of everything else that's going on in their lives.
Which I agree, which is why it's just befuddled as to why would a nice community like Putney, an environment like that, have students who report such dismal statements on kindness, such low scores on kindness, for example. It's just befuddling to me. But a couple of questions. As far as the first year and second year students taking it, I think a first year student couldn't answer the question, how connected do you feel to the adults at your school when they first come to school? Correct. They haven't been there long enough. So I think that just doing it once, at the very most, once in the spring would be good for the freshmen.
Yeah.
But then I was looking at, do you have a trusted adult? So in the high school, it's sky high, 89%. But then you contrast that with how connected do you feel to the adults at your school? It's 36%. Well, maybe that tells us that, the students are told to identify somebody that they can trust. They do that. But maybe the next step, the next evolution would be that adult reaching out and connecting with the students, being very proactive and saying, let's have a chat. How are you doing? That type of proactive results.
Okay, Eva, I think you had a question?
Yeah, I just have, for the panorama, one of the blind spots that just my evaluation, what I feel is that there seems to be a lack of questioning in regards to accessibility. So children who have neurodivergency, who have special needs, like those questions, there might be a vastly different answer to those questions, and I don't see the accessibility in the panorama, if that makes sense. So when you do the categories in regards to race, the accessibility to me seems lacking. I just think for me that's a blind spot within that survey, the accessibility.
Let me make sure I understand. The questions that we're asking are not getting at that question of accessibility.
Yes, so like
Okay.
there could be, it could be anything like, are you able to move around the school freely? Like questions like that, for some children it'd be like, yes, that's fine, but for a child who maybe have accessibility issues, they might say no. And I feel like there's like questions with accessibility that could be asked that maybe you can't get the exact wording, but you could actually see a theme in regards to accessibility. That's just one thing that popped out at me. And then the wording, I know that you said that you can't get like specific wording from the children, but I really think that if there was a way that you could get themes in regards to the wording of how they feel, so when they're saying, well, I don't have a sense of belonging, like what is it? Like what is the words that are coming up? Then you could actually get programs that connect specific to the wordings of what is lacking.
I wonder if that process might better be done as part of, say, the middle school leadership project, where teams of students are looking at climate survey data, identifying issues for their school, and taking action, having discussions, doing focus groups with other students. I think that's probably, we're small enough, I think that's probably where we could go and really get that interactive information on a retail level, rather than trying to pull it out of the panorama survey. I mean, it's almost as if we could do the screening with the panorama survey and then do some more interview-based, focus group-based work at the schools.
Yeah.
I have one question. Are these reports posted on the website? On the school, because I was sort of searching and I couldn't find them.
These slideshows?
Panorama, yes. Presentations.
The reports. I
No.
haven't put them on the.
No, okay, so it's only accessible to the community by going to an agenda and clicking on the link?
Sure.
Okay, all right.
All right, well,
Hannah's still has her hand up.
Hannah, very quickly, because we have gone past the allotted time, so what would you like to?
I just wanted to quickly comment. I believe it was Robin who was talking about the, maybe I'm wrong, desire to have like all 4 grades go through the process at BUHS. And I 100% agree with that. I think it was, I think that in order to get real data from the high school, the students who have been there the longest have a lot of good information. The other piece I wanted to mention, sorry if it's a little loud in the background here, is that we also offer a class at the high school. It's called Dimensions of Social Change. And that class looks at all the panorama data from the district at the elementary school and middle school levels, and they come up with workshops that they do with the elementary and middle school students when they come to the high school to work specifically around kind of the areas that they notice the most are the weaker areas. So I think that work is also happening. And I think that's it.
I think we are ready to move on. Thank you all for the lively discussion. We move on to the consent agenda, the clerk's report. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of June 27, 2023?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Is there any discussion?
I have one amendment. There is a recommendation that board members avail of the JurassicParliament.com workshops that they can be reimbursed for. That comment was not included in the minutes, so I move that we include that comment.
Okay. So there's been a motion to include material into the previous minutes. All those in favor of the motion to amend the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
I abstained. I wasn't here.
Okay, so that means we need to do a roll call vote. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so that's Ruby and Robin and Kim and Eva and Tim, were you?
Yeah.
And Deborah
And just an abstention.
and Anne is abstaining.
And you? Are
Oh.
you abstaining?
I would be abstaining too, yeah. So that would be 6 approving and 2 abstaining. Okay, so now that we have amended the minutes, are there any other amendments? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
I abstained.
Okay, so we're gonna do the roll call vote again. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please raise your hand. Okay, so Ruby and Robin and Kim and Eva and Tim and Deborah. And Anne is abstaining and I'm abstaining as well. So the minutes are approved. So now we move on to the fiscal report.
Okay, a couple of brief points to make.
I'm sorry, hang on just one second. There is one other item that was on the agenda under the administrative report. That was about it was on the agenda about the restorative justice coordinator. I know that we talked about that in executive session, but since it's on the agenda, I'm sorry, shouldn't have said this when Mark was out of the room. I was just mentioning, it is on the agenda about the restorative justice coordinator position. I know that we talked about that already in the executive session, but do you want to say anything about that in the public meeting before we move on?
Just that we're actively looking to fill the position.
Thank you very much, Robin, for helping to catch that. So now we are on to the fiscal report.
Okay, yeah, just a couple of updates. So we're very busy at the business office getting ready for the annual CPA audit for all of our entities. That's coming along well, or as expected. There's a lot of data that comes in over the month of July. Just today, we have the data we need for one of our largest sources of state funding. It generated a journal entry of about $700,000 as a receivable. So there's those kinds of large revenues in this case that we have to quantify and then record into the financial statements. So that's underway, and we will be prepared to report to the Agency of Ed as we do every year by August 15th. The annual statistical report. And then subsequent to that, I'll be able to also provide the board with sort of here's how we ended up the fiscal year. In general, I expect it to be favorable against our budget plan. You may recall we had budgeted to spend $900,000 more than we collect in revenue as a way to reduce the tax liability, but also as a way to maintain our fund balance at a target level. Another thing that's come up just recently, and I think Ruby forwarded some correspondence around the EES program and looking to create a smaller footprint in their operation. This is the Early Education Services. It's the federal Head Start program. So I have met with Mark and Tate and Tate Erickson and Brandy Levesque, our pre-K coordinator. She's our early ed, special ed services director. About existing programs that are going on at Canal Street School, and then what a vision for the future might be. So there's a good deal of programming currently happening from the SD and the SU, Windham Southeast Supervisor Union, and the SD's point of view, in that's a 2-floor building with a very nice basement floor as well. So there's 3 floors. Currently, early education services through the Head Start program are only actively using the first floor for pre-K instruction and programming. The early childhood special ed services group, which is part of the supervisory union, special ed service group for our 3 and 4-year-olds are currently using the 2nd floor of Canal Street. And that's for speech language services, family support, or in providing services to students as needed. So there's been quite a presence there at the Canal Street School for pre-K education. And I don't know how closely you folks followed the legislative session. Act 76 did pass. It's very much a focus on expanding pre-K, public pre-K, and the state of Vermont. At one point, I think they wanted it mandatory and effective for the upcoming school year, but what they ended up as a consensus is directing the Agency of Education to look at substantially expanding public pre-K effective in fiscal year 26. That there's an expectation for a report that will come out next year to inform next steps. So there's clearly a lot of interest in expanding programs, and the Canal Street School will continue to be a terrific facility for that. In just a brief conversation today with Tate Erickson, our special ed director, and Brandy Levesque, our early childhood services special ed coordinator. They had a number of ideas of how we can have more support services in a more inclusive environment. As you know, Head Start is a income-based criteria to be eligible for those services, and the idea of bringing in support for the broader group of students for those age groups, and then providing OT, PT, and various other services, speech, language, and so on, is very appealing, and the need is significant. So a little bit of background on that. Much more to come as that plan gets defined. But the early education services are leaving the Canal Street School in August.
Right. Is that building air conditioned?
I don't know if they have room space conditioners, but it's certainly not from on a building automated system point of view.
I'm reminded, of course, we're going to have more heat events going forward. And the last year, the Student Advisory Committee members commented on how brutally hot some of the classrooms are in the second floor of the high school. And we know that students concentrate better when the temperature is more conducive to learning. So maybe some thought could be given to, if not air conditioning, at least fans or something to mitigate the extreme heat that we're going to experience.
Yeah, the Canal Street School is, it does have a boiler, an oil boiler, and it's becoming close to its useful life, just as the Oak Grove is our last, elementary school. And any retrofit is going to include a coil that at absolute minimum would be able to manage the humidity, which creates a lot more comfortable environment. We have already done that for the Academy School, all the HVAC retrofits, these unit ventilators that are all in the elementary classrooms. They do have a cooling coil in them. We don't have a cooling system yet, but they can be retrofitted in anticipation of those issues. And I'm certain we'll do that at the Canal Street School.
Definitely a good point, though, Tim, for sure. These are old buildings and they heat up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the high school.
Yeah.
It's imagining being in this heat, studying 8 hours a day.
Yeah, we seem to be without air tonight, I'm sorry. Completely without air.
I was just gonna say, this is not conducive to an effective meeting, because I'm dying here right now.
It gets to be upper 80s in the classrooms at BUHS BAM's Career Center.
Yeah.
Can I ask for a clarity around the Canal Street?
Mm-hmm.
So EES is moving to
The
SD, the Burge Street.
Yeah.
And you said that the early education special ed has been on the second floor of Canal Street. Did you say that? Or is it, yeah. So are they staying there, or is this special ed also moving to Burge Street?
No,
So-
they're staying in.
Okay. And so do you have a sense of what the vacated space in Canal is going to be used for?
It's that general description that Brandy and Tate had articulated.
Expanding their.
Yeah, expanded their services. Right now, they don't feel that they have adequate space for meeting with families with specific support services for individual students that need additional support. They've talked about for students that are not enrolled in a pre-K program, creating a play group in that space would be very conducive. But these are at this point ideas based on information that Deb Gass just shared last week.
Right.
So
and one last question is around if with the kind of move towards or emphasis towards moving towards universal pre-K to the extent that there's an expansion of the early education services. That facility is it's still our facility and can be manipulated in whatever way we need.
Yeah. That was a building owned by the Brattleboro Town School District, and when the Southeast School District formed, it's part of the assets of this district. Yeah.
Thanks.
The other thing I just wanted to mention is there was an interest from a citizen approached, I think our facility manager, interested in purchasing some of school property. We don't see those kind of requests very often, but in this case, I think it has a lot of merit. It's something that I'll be looking into. It's just down the road here at South Main Street, where it converges with Cotton Mill. I don't know if you know the neighborhood, but if you drive down Cotton Mill down to 142, you'll see a very extensive bank of trees, very steep property, and this is the property owner interested in trees that are either overhanging in their yard, that are on the district's property, or just wanting to manage the property that's right out there. I guess that would be their southeast view. So it's not a very extensive area, but it is not usable land in terms, and there has been no management of this property. And you may or may not, for those folks, Kim, I know you've been on the Brattleboro Town Board before. This is actually an issue for a number of parcels where the years and years ago, the land that the town of Brattleboro didn't want got kind of pushed over to the school district. And I don't know how many years, but probably 75 years ago. So a lot of these great big old oak trees that overhang our roadways and some of our neighbors eventually have to be dealt with. Mark knows all about that. At the Green Street School, we had these giant trees overhanging the playground, and we had to have a forester come in and make sure they're safe. And so in this case, it's a resident, but it's an issue I just wanted you to be aware of. Property disposal is got a specific protocol in the state statutes, so I'll be looking into that and keeping you informed. Great.
Is it contiguous to is it like part of campus? And so no, it's just it's a separate. Okay,
it's that bank as you're going down towards 142.
I had no idea.
Yes, it'd be nice if we could combine all of these little parcels of land into a larger parcel of land magically, so we have more space somewhere.
Yeah, but these are precipitous cliff drops with a lot of timber on them that are just essentially a liability to the district.
Okay.
It is the saga of our lives.
I would just hope that they would not be removing too many trees, so then that makes that bank a liability. Yeah. Because then you don't have the trees and the roots holding
that's very important. Probably
the dirt.
Yeah. I think it's more of the risk of a tree toppling onto a house or a garage.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, the next topic on the agenda is the public comment on non-agenda items. We should take a 5-minute break. Do we want to wait until after the public comment, or do we want to do that?
Let's wait till after.
Okay, all right, so we will move on to public comment on non-agenda items. 10 minutes. Is there anyone in Zoom?
Liz has a hand up.
Liz.
Hi. The website as it is now is pretty unusable. I'm hoping they'll fix it. But when you go on the website now, I think I figured out a way to access agendas for this board, but I could be wrong there. I actually used the Zoom link from my Brattleboro to attend this meeting. the minutes and the agendas are not there. At least I can't access them from this Mac. Has anybody looked at that website lately and tried to use it?
Looking at it now, Liz.
I've been using it all meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
WSESU.org.
Yeah.
Let me pull it up on, if I can, I'll share my screen.
It's there.
Yeah, I've been toggling, Liz, it's Ruby. I've been toggling between the agendas and the minutes and the policies on my phone, which is a Mac, or is it an Apple?
It's there.
So as I'm sharing my screen, are you seeing the website coming up there?
Yeah.
With the first day, student day, scrolling
Yeah.
across? Okay,
Yeah.
you go to school boards,
Yeah.
Windham Southeast District School District Board.
Okay, that pop-up window isn't showing on my computer, so maybe it's just this computer.
Okay, it should, if you hit the little, rather than hitting the school boards, hit the little down arrow adjacent.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
Huh.
And it
Okay.
didn't come up. So maybe this computer
Can
is
you-
blocking that.
Can you email me with sort of specs from your computer, what kind of Mac, that sort of thing, and browser, and I'll see if I can troubleshoot.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'm gonna ask one more time if there's anyone in, online who would like to contribute to public comment on non-agenda items. Okay, seeing as there has been no response, I'm going to indicate that it's 7:52 and we will take a 5-minute break. So we will be back at 7:57. Okay, we are back from our break at 7:57. Thank you everyone for returning. We are now on to unfinished business. The sexual abuse investigation update, you may recall at the last meeting, Amy Goddard had received an additional report. That's the latest information that I have on that. Sure, okay.
Mindy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is, you said that you had met with Goddard and given her like a request for the information that you want. And I'm wondering if you can tell us what you requested from her. And also, when you expect to receive the information from her or to report it, and if you are going to report it to the public.
Well, I can clarify one thing. We didn't meet with Attorney Goddard. We met with Attorney Kendall Host. And I'm trying to remember back to that executive session. I'd have to go back but my last recollection is that we were preparing to or expecting to have some report to the board coming up, but then Attorney Goddard received some other information, another report, and I have no information on that, and as appropriate, and so I don't have I don't have any further information on that. If she hadn't received another report, then we probably would be working toward providing something to the public. But I don't know what the substance of the report that she's received is. So
I do, and it was a month ago. So I guess I'm wondering if you make demands of her at all. Do you ask her? Do you set deadlines or any kind of like time or limits or parameters? I'm just noticing that we are coming up on 2 years from the publication of my article. And although the district's sense of urgency may be related mainly to current employees, I'm also aware that some of the people who've been named in these reports are people who are still actively working with kids. And I feel some sense of urgency about that. I know that you want Attorney Goddard to do a very thorough job in corroborating these reports, but I do wonder about the total lack of urgency around reports that contain information that could indicate that there's some threat to kids.
Well, I can say that I will ask Mark to respond if I'm incorrect, but if there was information that implicated someone who is currently at the school, my understanding is that would be that's in a different category from someone who is no longer at the school. If someone is at the school, I don't even know that comes to the board. I think that goes to the administration, and they would be addressing it in particular. I would suggest if you have concerns about particular administration, particular teachers, whoever it is you are indicating are still in contact with students, it sounds like you may have some information that the board doesn't have. And so I would suggest that if you feel that Amy Goddard is not addressing it quickly enough, you can certainly make the indicate to the superintendent your concern. I don't know that he would be able to comment on it, and I don't know that would be appropriate for him to comment on it or respond directly to you. But if you feel, based on information that you have, that I don't believe the board has, then I would encourage you to reach out, and I believe you can send Mark an email about it, or you can certainly indicate to Amy Goddard if you feel that you have information that maybe she is not acting upon. You're welcome to reach out to her as well.
I'm sorry. I have given her all of the information that I have. And it's not necessarily related to people who are still teaching in your schools, but they are still possibly in contact with children. And so I guess I wonder about the narrow view of thinking that the only concern is the district's liability as related to these people being involved in their schools. Because there's also the concern that they are in the larger community, possibly in contact with kids. And I'm concerned about that.
Well, I appreciate your comment, and I will reach out to our attorney again to see if I can try and prompt that process to move along. But I encourage you, if you have information about any current teachers, administration, whatnot, to send communication to Mark Spino as the superintendent, as that would be the appropriate direction for that to go to. That it wouldn't be the board who would be addressing current personnel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So we will move on to B. Policy and amendment presents the following for adoption. Action required. Before I hand this over to Deborah, I will indicate that it was my intention to move the number A, or letter A, under new business up to just above this, because you might see that there are two indications of dress code. So I am making a motion for the board to table the discussion and action on F42 dress code until after the board addresses new business letter A, policy and amendment request that the board rescind LSP1 dress code. So I have made the motion. Is there any discussion?
Why wouldn't we just move the rescinding new business into, do it before? I don't understand why we can't just.
It's listed here. I don't believe I can change the agenda after we've
No, we can't, but you can table it until.
And that's what I'm asking, is to table just that one until we get down to the new business.
Okay. We change the agenda all the time at the start of the meeting. That's
And
from a
I
process
did change
perspective.
things, but
So it's just the timing thing.
it's just the timing thing, yeah, it's just, and I had seen it and I had intended to do that, and it was just one of those things that so my apologies for the confusion. So all those in favor of tabling F42 dress code until we address the new business letter A, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. So now I will hand it over to Deborah to address the rest of the policy amendments.
So, leaving aside F42 for the moment, there are two policies that are being presented to the board for adoption. And if there is no objection, do I have board approval to group them together in one motion, or should I? Separate motions, that was my note to myself, to do it as separate, right. Okay, so the first policy for adoption by the board, I move that E17, fire and emergency preparedness drills, be approved by this board for adoption.
A motion has been made to adopt E17, fire and emergency preparedness drills. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting E17, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. The second policy for adoption by this board, I move that this board adopt H8, access control and visitor management.
Motion has been made to adopt H8, access control and visitor management. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving H8, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay.
And the next policy, and this is presenting it to the board for a second reading, and that's H7, leadership councils. So we are now in a 10-day reading period until the next board meeting. And if there is no objection during that period, it will be presented for readoption at the next board meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, so moving on to board matters training, leadership council updates. Do we have any updates or questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Moving on. Board subcommittees. I have social justice committee, possible action required.
Yes. Hang on. Okay, there was a few things that we discussed at our meeting that we would like the board to consider. So I guess I'll just go, these are all in the minutes, and I'm just gonna read the 4 items one at a time. So the first one is that in the 2021-2022 school year, which was the last time that the Social Justice Committee was actively meeting until this spring, that version of the committee had developed 3 questions related to diversity and equity that should be included on all job applications. And as far as I could tell, it wasn't ever voted on by the entire board whether or not to do that. Eva, did you find anything that indicated that?
It was proposed, but it wasn't.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's what I saw too. They started talking about it, and then they were like, "We'll consider the rest of this later."
I did want to say that in the applications that were put out to that were put out on schools on the various advertising, those 3 questions were originally put, and then it went down to 1 question.
So the current applications seem to be listing part of the first question, which also kind of had 3 pieces to it. So the committee recommends that the applications return to the practice of having all 3 questions, and I can send that text on to the superintendent and HR person. So is that something that we would like to have like a motion on, or just talk about?
Well, I think it would need a motion.
Mark wants to say something.
Mark has a question.
Yeah.
Can I speak to it, or?
No, please,
Okay.
please, yeah.
I was just gonna respectfully request that we put that motion on hold until after we've had some more time to collaborate with our new HR director, Michael Kelleher. I know he is planning on attending the next Social Justice Committee in August. And there's in the very near future, a policy meeting that will include Social Justice Committee that Mike is intending to join. But I think there'd be some room for collaboration on some of the suggestions that I'd love for Mike to weigh in on and work with the SJ committee on.
So the 3 questions that were asked, the previous social justice committee took a really long, it was a lot of work. They took a long time. This was over a year, and it was thoughtfully, every question, there were multiple meetings on each question. There was so much thought that was put into it. And I think that if just reading the questions, I think that I don't think we could do any better, to be honest with you.
Questions are great. Talking more about process and hearing from an HR director who's been in HR for many number of years. He shared some perspectives with me that I think would be very helpful to collaborate with the Social Justice Committee on. That's all.
So was there more than, was that the only thing that you were bringing, or was there?
No, there's 3 other things.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't feel like this is just me. I don't feel like that this is so urgent that we have to act on it tonight versus 2 weeks from now. I think that it's okay to wait and discuss with the, oh my God, I did something. To discuss with the HR department and then vote on it. But I also agree with Eva that these questions were very thoughtfully developed. They've already been used in the past on our applications, and it seems like it might have been an oversight that the second and third one got cut off. But I'm happy to discuss it in the policy council and social justice committee meetings with Michael before having the board vote to officially recommend this, if that feels more comfortable. Is that okay?
Ruby, you want to?
I think it would be wise. I mean, at this point, I've had the benefit of seeing the questions at some point, but they're not like at my fingertips. So I think the best course of action would be for the Social Justice Committee to, consult with Mark and consult with the new HR director and about not just the questions but the process, because I do think that my own experience with School Spring, I don't love School Spring, but I understand the usefulness of it. But it's possible that the reason that there's one question is because it was just that's where the spot is, and so there needs to be some strategic thinking about these are the questions we want. If these are the questions we want, how do we ask them? How do we get people to respond in that way? And I think that's almost more important than agreeing to the questions, and that does need to happen with the people who put the process in place.
The questions are in the minutes. I can read them. The first one is
of the Social Justice Committee minutes.
Yeah.
Right. So I, in my opinion, it's a waste of time to read them out loud. If we're, I think that we can all go to the minutes, and I think that they're valuable.
The questions are great.
I don't have them up and looking at them, and so acting on something that I haven't reviewed, I feel like is not, because I wasn't prepared to. I didn't know that that's what we were going to be discussing today. That's all.
Could we read the questions? Because I think there are people in the community that would like to know, and it would be really helpful for marginalized people and people of color to hear our commitment to diversity. And I think it would be impactful for them to hear the 3 questions.
So the 3 questions are, 1, explain your experiences working with historically marginalized groups. What have you learned from these experiences? Include times when you have made mistakes. 2, describe your framework for equity and social justice in the classroom or workplace and its origin. And 3, where did you hear about this job posting? And I believe the 3rd question was there to support our efforts with recruiting a diverse workforce so that we can tell what is effective.
Learn from our experiences, yes.
Tim?
When is the next regular board meeting? 2 weeks since? And when's the next social justice meeting?
Next social,
The social justice meeting's on August 3rd. And when is the policy meeting?
August 22nd.
Okay, so with respect to Mark's concern about process, I think the questions are great. We're in a hiring mode right now. I'd say go ahead with the motion. Let's get it done.
I mean, I think that the meeting on August 3rd is only like less than 2 weeks from now. I think if we get feedback at that, then we could just have a motion at our next meeting. Would that feel okay?
I think
When is the next
might
board
be
meeting?
voting this.
I don't have an answer to that, but I was going to move that we forward those questions to Mark and to let the Social Justice Committee forward the questions to Mark and to the new HR director to bring back a process.
I mean, I already sent them to him.
And I did as well as to Michael
No, but with
Kelleher.
the intention of working with them
Right,
and then
right.
bringing back a process.
Okay.
Okay, so
I mean, the context of that type of a motion is rather than saying, these are the questions that must be used, these are the questions we would like to move forward with finalization and a process.
I don't feel like we really need a motion to just send an email. That's just, I can do that. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
well, are you moving that we table this discussion until the next board meeting?
If it's the will of this group to move on, to act on these questions, which I think there's no contest about the questions. The questions are great. And so my motion is that the Social Justice Committee work with Mark and the new HR director to finalize the questions and the process by which they're asked in the application. I mean, if that's what we want to do to end this agenda item and move forward, I think we should, because there's no contest to the questions that I see.
Okay, I just wanted to just give just a little bit of historical context with the questions. So on February 8th, it was brought up to be voted on.
Of 2021.
Yeah.
Or 2022, February 8th of 2022.
Yeah, and then the next meeting, they decided to table it on the 8th. The next meeting, it was brought up again. They decided to table it. Then it was brought up in March. And the answer to that was that they were focused on diversity and it was never brought up again. So I'm just in the historical, that's why with the questions coming up now, people are like, okay, you're tabling it now, but there is a history of it being tabled. So I want to make sure that this is going to get done. Basically what I'm saying. It's not like the process hasn't been done before.
Ruby, is it your expectation that there's going to be some report to the board at the next meeting?
Yes, sure. Or at the next possible meeting. I know that that there were all those dates being thrown out. I don't know. I mean, but yes, that my expectation, my motion is not to table things. My motion is to, move these questions forward and come back with a finalized process, which to me doesn't feel like tabling, but
Okay.
if that's.
Okay,
yeah.
I misunderstood.
Is Ruby's motion the only motion we have on the table?
I believe so, because I don't believe that Robin had made.
I didn't.
Yeah, so, Robin, I'm sorry, do you have a sense of what the motion is, and can you read it back to us? Or
Can you say it again, Ruby? I mean, you said it like 3 ways, 3 kind of differently worded ways, so let's settle on the wording. This is what I wrote down the last time, but I think I might have been kind of paraphrasing you. Motion to direct the Social Justice Committee to work with Mark and the HR Director to develop a process to move forward with these questions. Is that what you said?
Sure.
Okay, so Ruby has made the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. So there's Ruby, and there's Robin, and Kim, and Ann. And all those opposed, please raise your hand.
Changed it.
Okay, so there is Eva and Tim and Deborah opposed, so the motion passes. So, will you email Mark and the new HR director with the questions?
I mean, I have sent it from the questions
We have
already.
the questions.
You have the que-
Yeah, and-
I think that we can work at our meeting on August 3rd to make the final plan and vote on it on August 8th at our next meeting. That is what I expect that we will do. We're not going to table this and then rework it and deconstruct the questions and delay it. Okay?
Well, this actually sounds like a forward movement, because it sounds like you might have more than just us voting on the questions, because hopefully when you come back, you will have some actual, something in place that will be productive. Did you have more,
Yes.
from the, okay.
And I don't know if people are going to feel the same about wanting to have all of these things discussed at our next meeting and then voted on at the August 8th meeting, but I'm just going to read them all, and that people can see if there's anything that we want to vote on tonight, or if you want to wait until the next meeting. Okay, the next one is that the Social Justice Committee would like the WSESD board to consider asking principals, this is like as a general practice, asking principals to email information ahead of the meeting to board members for each person they are bringing forward to hire that includes cover letter, CV, and application, which should include the 3 questions referenced above. So this is in addition to what they are already sending us, which is a summary of their process and the person that they are recommending for hire, and like a 1-sentencer of the person's qualifications, that we're asking for these other documentations to be included with those emails.
Mark, did you want to speak to the process as it happens now?
Well, the process now is prior to a board meeting, Mo puts together that summary introducing the candidate that's going to be brought to the board. So it sounds like the SJ committee is asking for more information beyond that moving forward. My personal opinion would be to let's have a dialogue at the next Social Justice Committee with that recommendation as well. I think Mike has a lot of insight to bring to our school district around hiring processes. That's all.
The way I heard you just state it, Robin, it's not a motion, it's not a directive, it's a request. The request has already been made. So move on to the next one.
Okay, I mean, I guess we haven't communicated that request to the principals except for via this meeting that we're having right now, but we can certainly send that request out and discuss it at our next meeting as well.
Well, just as a point of process, I think that the request is made to the superintendent, who then directs the principals. That
I see.
requests should not come from the board to individual principals. So it
Right.
goes directly to the superintendent.
And did you have a third?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to
No,
take
no.
notes at the same time. Okay, the next one is for job applicant screening committees that include board members. The Social Justice Committee recommends that board member representation on committees be determined by board vote in a public meeting. This could be incorporated into policy D1. So this one I do think is something that we probably want to not vote on as a board yet, but vote on it at the policy council? Or how does that, what are you thinking on that, Deborah? We're recommending an adjustment to the policy.
Yeah, I'm just rereading it. It's in front of me right now. I don't see why it wouldn't be a motion this evening.
Okay,
I don't think this has to wait for policy committee meeting regarding D1. What we are saying is that board member representation on whether it's a hiring committee, a screening committee, that board representation be determined by the board.
Okay, I will do a motion. Hang on one second.
I just have a quick question before the motion.
Sure.
Where are these all points that were in the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, because
It's at the top.
okay.
It's the first page of the minutes,
Okay.
July 13th.
Okay.
The four
Social
bullet points
justice.
right at the
Okay.
top
Yeah,
that says we're
it's
going
the
to
four
release
bullets.
at a
Okay.
meeting and talk about it.
So
Okay.
this is the third one. And for me, this third bullet simply states that the board determines who the one or two board representatives will be on a specific screening or hiring committee. That's determined by the board. It's not determined by people volunteering or by people asked to be on a hiring or screening committee. If there is a request, that should come from, I would think, the superintendent directly to the board chair.
Okay, I'll just make a motion about this and then we can discuss it, and if people want to vote or not vote, we can do that. I move that for job applicant screening committees that include board members, board member representation on the committee should be determined by board vote in a public meeting.
Is there any discussion? Okay, Mark?
I mean, I think they're all really good ideas. I would like to wait until after the social justice meeting on the, was it August 3rd, I believe?
Yeah, third.
So there could at least be, a collaboration with our new HR director. Nothing against the ideas. I just think that would be helpful for this process and then developing a formal process.
So with bullet number 3, I think this is board business, very, very specifically, in terms of certain job categories that necessitate board representation. I think this is board business.
Okay, is there any other discussion, or are we ready to vote? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, Robin, will you read the motion again?
For job applicant screening committees I move that for job applicant screening committees that include board members, board member representation on the committee should be determined by board vote in a public meeting.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions?
Can I have a question, and I'm sorry, it just came to my head. It's for many of us who are in our local communities and at our schools. There are hiring committees that aren't, there isn't necessarily a spot for a board member. That's not what this is pertaining to.
Right. It's only for ones that are already gonna include a board member or 2 board members, whatever that.
Got it.
If they're gonna be board members, we should be public about how those are chosen. That's what the intention of that thing is.
Did you have another?
Okay, yes, this is the last one, and I'm sure that you're gonna say we should discuss this in the meeting, and I have to say I kind of agree on that, but this is what the other intention of the committee is. The Social Justice Committee recommends that a survey be developed to acquire baseline data on the current diversity of WSESD staff for the purpose of evaluating progress toward the goal of increasing staff diversity. The survey could be repeated in future years or as additional staff are hired.
Same. I would request the same thing respectfully. And I do know Mike is working on projects like this. And some more clarity could be shared with the committee in a couple of weeks.
So, is there any objection to bringing that to the superintendent and the HR director at that meeting? Okay, seeing no objection to that, we will, if there's nothing else from the Social Justice Committee, we will move along to the board retreat.
Could I give some updates on other committees?
Yes, please do.
First of all, thank you to the Social Justice Committee. You're doing great work. That's wonderful. And I'm going to try to breeze through mine. I just want to alert the board. The Communications Council is not a very active. We haven't had a meeting, but I wanted to alert you that we had set a goal of posting agendas and posting some snippet of what's going to happen, so that trying to just give access to people in different ways. And one of the goals that we'd set for ourselves, which hasn't been happening but will start to happen, is hopefully posting links to minutes as they're posted that would also have that summary that's at the top that would go in the body of the post. So when we do that, there may be more dialoguing or comments, and so I would just encourage us as board members to be mindful of how we're commenting publicly if someone has an issue related to those posts. The posts will come from the WSESD board page, and it's we don't really engage much on comments other than informational. That's just a piece of, just information for you guys. I also think that we're going to be posting, at the last meeting we approved meeting norms, and we will post in some capacity a slide or multiple slides somehow. We'll be posting that to the public via social media, so you'll see that, and hopefully we can use that as a kind of touchstone periodically to remind people what those meeting norms are. So that's the Communication Council.
Can I just touch on that and acknowledge that you had sent out something to me, and I think maybe to Deborah, about posting, having the meeting norms or something at the beginning when I read the dialogue about opening up the meeting, just to kind of give a reminder of the expectations of the board. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. If we can come to, and figure out the process and when to put it up and, specifically what to put there. I think it's a good reminder to everyone, from board members, admin, public, everyone, what the expectation is and the purpose of the meeting.
Can we make a recommendation to the Communications Council?
You can. We don't meet very frequently.
Who is it? You?
It's Robin and me, and then there are some community members who show up.
We're
Michelle's
close to passing the Leadership Council policy, but I don't think that there's a school in the district that is satisfied with the number of parent-guardian involvement in the Leadership Councils. So I think it would be great if the Communications Council put their minds to letting the public know parents and guardians that these leadership councils aren't just for leaders, they're public forums. They're for everybody to engage in making the school better and communicating with the board. If that would be a useful objective, like a goal for the communications council, but I don't want to tell you how to run your committee.
I mean, we that was a part of what we discussed, I think, in terms of how to, but I can certainly take that and bring it to our next meeting, whenever that is planned to be. We don't have a regular cycle, but that was definitely a core part, I think, of what we talked about. It's probably reflected in the minutes. I haven't looked at them in many months.
I'm gonna look and see, it's from May 12th.
But I think that's a great idea to bring back.
If I can drop in on that meeting, I will.
Yeah. I'll let you know when it is. So the next thing, I just wanted to let you know that you heard about the EES. I just wanted to let the board know that Deb Gass of EES is really taking seriously the board's presence on their council. She invited me to come to her leadership retreat, which was really informative, and so I'm really hopeful for her involvement and kind of just filling the board in on what their initiatives are and the changes. They've got a lot going on, but it was really interesting to be part of their board retreat. And then lastly, the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee, I am delinquent on providing minutes to on those, and I'm really sorry, but I have them and I just need to get them to Mo. But the focus will be at the next meeting. The focus will be on equity in access to pre-K, and that's partly in response to, as Frank mentioned, the child care bill has created at the statewide level, a universal pre-K committee that will be considering a movement in that direction. So that was a big part of what we talked about, and we have some work to do to kind of ask Frank and Mark potentially for numbers and information that would help that board committee consider access to, what are the issues, what are the things that need to be thought of in terms of equity across the district. And then the other thing, and this is the big thing, and then I'll be quiet, and you haven't seen it yet, so it's unfair, but by the next meeting, you will have the minutes forwarded to you, and we talked about and discussed a proposal for rotating meetings, board meetings at different schools. And so that is part of the minutes and will be coming, that's a formal proposal that will be coming to this board.
It's interesting. Paul and VCTV and Deborah and I had a quick conversation before the meeting about some of the challenges that might be associated with that. Paul, do you want to speak to?
Part of my recollection, things may have changed. My recollection is that some schools and sort of the internet connection is flaky enough that it was hard for BCTV and it was certainly hard to run any Zoom sessions. That may have changed. The whole landscape has changed considerably. We certainly have. That was, presumably there was fiber there. I think I think we have to do a whole lot of testing before we were confident that a particular, any specific site would be able to support it. I suspect that there are some locations that are more amenable than others. Another question is the degree to which we have a big screen versus a video projector for providing the Zoom connection.
I mean, I think those are, I don't think we need to take any more time at this meeting, but like at the next meeting, we can talk about those things. We can, I think that there are probably hurdles that we have to, jump over. And I think that committee thought that would be a good idea to do, to like find the hurdles and jump over them. But we can discuss it at the next meeting. And that's all. That's the end of my.
Well, when I send the email out for agenda items, if that's not on there, please feel free to prompt me to include that. And perhaps Paul will have maybe some more information about some of the different locations, about their
Yeah, I still have to get over the trauma of the last one, but we'll get there.
So, thank you very much, Ruby. So if there are no more board subcommittee reports,
Board retreat.
then we will move on to the board retreat. So August 11th, I believe we have a moderator. Deborah and I are working on the agenda. And as we do that, I'm going to make another, I think I made a request already for people to send things that they feel might be helpful to include. Please feel free to send or continue to send or resend if you feel that there's something that would be helpful to be on there that would be beneficial for the board.
And I'd like to just reiterate, please resend, even if you've already sent something. We don't want anything to get lost.
And we want to make sure that we're doing, making sure that it's responsive to what the board needs.
Who's the moderator?
I don't know that we're at liberty to discuss that yet.
We're not ready.
I think we have to go into
Motion later.
We're going into
the executive session.
Yeah. So we will announce it at the. We will have one more meeting before that, and
Is it me?
it is absolutely you. You are not. Absolutely. You just don't know.
And do we know where it will be yet, or is that?
So there are two locations. I just
Okay.
have to. I think both locations will work, but I just have to get back to see which one is the better option. Okay.
And we're definitely staying within the time frame of what we've set in terms of the length
All
of the
workshops, all workshops and trainings stay within the time frame.
Okay.
They're very different.
Right.
That's been my experience. They end promptly at 9 o'clock. And with a moderator, it will end promptly, it'll begin at 5 and end at 9. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions on the board retreat? Okay. Then we will move on to new business. So we are doing A, policy and amendment request the board rescind LSP1 Dress Code. Turn it over to Deborah.
I move that the board rescind LSP1 Student Dress Code.
Would you like to explain?
Oh, am I supposed to explain? Or is there discussion?
Is there any discussion?
So LSP exists, it's specific to Brattleboro Union High School. And it is antiquated and really problematic. So again, the motion to rescind LSP 1.
So the motion has been made. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of rescinding LSP1 Dress Code, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Now we move back to F42 Dress Code.
Having done that, the Policy and Amendment Committee makes a motion that this particular board adopt F42 dress code. And that's the motion. And just as a sidebar, this is again an adoption and not a readoption. This is an adoption.
The motion has been made. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving F42 dress code, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, wonderful. So we have passed that.
Reality remained firm, amazing.
Contrasted with animal policy.
So the last item on the agenda before, I think we just have 2 executive sessions. The last item is board vacancy. We did have one candidate submit a letter of interest, and that was very shortly after that, the candidate determined that it was not going to work for them and withdrew from consideration. So we are back to a board vacancy without a candidate. right, so, I guess we need to, extend the deadline and maybe we advertise again.
Yep.
I can say that, so the Brattleboro Select Board had already put it on their agenda to coordinate with us at 7 o'clock this evening. And then I had to let them know that the person had withdrawn. But I did encourage the chair to have a discussion and possibly encourage people to, from Brattleboro to submit a letter of interest. So, any other questions or Ruby?
I'll be in touch with Mo about getting an updated slide to, with the new date, to post on social media, but it feels like, so this is the third time we're extending it. I feel like we could think more strategically and innovatively about how, Brattleboro is our biggest town, and I'm feeling sad that we're not getting people, and this is not an easy board to sit on for lots of reasons. Timing's one of them. But I wonder if, I know this is challenging because there might be contentious people who come, but could we come and have a cup of coffee with a board member, talk, we want you to understand or ask questions, something. I know that's a little scary because you're opening doors, but I just wonder if that we need something different to try to shake people out of the bushes and see if they'll come
I
in.
think that's a good idea. I'm going to ask Anne as far as open meeting law and those considerations that we're always trying to make sure we follow. Is there any sort of welcome to the public that we can do, that we can invite people to meet us and sort of, maybe we can.
We can, if we wanted to do it at an open meeting.
As
Or-
just a
Yeah,
meeting for.
unless we don't have enough people, to make a quorum having those meetings. But certainly we can reach out to people we know in Brattleboro and invite them to come and find out what everything's about. But just like a private meeting, all of us to talk about that board business.
Well, I didn't know if it would have to actually be a board meeting and that sort of just.
If all of us are expected to be there, it must be warned.
Yeah.
I don't think
Some of us are
everyone would need to
expected
be there.
It does not have to be warned.
I don't think everyone would need to be there, and I think it should be warned. We want people to know about it and come to it. There's no reason why it should be private, but it doesn't have to be here. It could be, in the co-op or Amy's or something. But it doesn't really matter if it's warned. It doesn't really matter if there's a quorum or not, because we're not going to be taking any action. So it's perfectly allowed to have a warned meeting where a non-quorum amount of people show up and then they don't actually take any action. That's happened.
I did see when I was running, there was a couple of the select boards who had run. They did a meet your new select board at the library, and they just sat there for a couple of hours, and people could just go up and talk and see who they were, and that could be an option.
And that continues. One of the new select board members is, I think, on a Monday or something at the Works at a set time and sits at a table and invites people to come talk to him.
That still happens.
I think the public sees that Robin and Kim and I are doing such a stellar job representing Brattleboro, they don't see a need.
I've had conversations with a lot of people about serving on this board, and maybe I'm being too honest because none of them have submitted their letter or submitted and then withdrew it. So it is a heavy lift, and people in this community are really enthusiastic about public service, but I think a lot of people that tend to volunteer to do stuff like this are at max capacity already. And I think that's part of why it's been difficult to find somebody.
I want to just respond a little bit to that because it is a heavy lift, and I have childcare issues that I've had to move mountains to do to make this happen. But as a new board member, my expectations about what this board would require of me have not been met. So there's in between, we really we're operating in open meeting primarily and in committee, and that's it. And so there's like vast swaths of time where I don't hear from any of you people. And so I would like to encourage us to it is a heavy lift, but also it's not as if you get phone calls all the time. Certain committees are way more, work. But for the most part, you could be on this board, and really your commitment is the time in this meeting. And so I just wanted to say that publicly because I know that that's a concern that people might have if they're watching. And Deborah, I think I totally stole you had your hand up.
No, I totally agree with you. My life is very different at this point, being a vice chair from being a board member. And I'm not looking to minimize in any way the work that board members do or the heavy lifting that board members do, because it's more than just, I think, at least for me as a board member, it was never about just coming to the meeting. I had to do homework to be here in order to be a responsible elected official. So it is heavy lifting, and for me, it's much more than the time. The issue of time, we're a large district, and we have a lot of crucial issues going on in our district. So, and hence all the executive sessions. But I'm curious to know, I just want to go back to something that Robin said, and that was about doing, a coffee meet and greet.
That was Eva's idea.
Oh, that was Eva's idea. But no, I'm just going to go back to, okay, so I'm conflating the two. But I'm going back to something I think that you said, Robin, and that is, I'm not sure I heard you, the fan is right behind me. You said it doesn't have to be warned, or it can be warned, it doesn't matter.
I said I think it should be warned, but it doesn't matter if there's a quorum of board members that show up. It doesn't matter if more than half of us come to it, or if it's just 3 people. It's not going to make any difference because we're not trying to take any actions.
So even if it were 1 or 2 board members, you're saying that it should be warned?
I mean, if the plan is, for instance, me and Ruby are going to go and talk to people at the works, I don't think you have to warn that unless we're going to talk about the communications council. But if it was like any board members who want to come and talk to the community can come on this day, and people can come and we don't know who's going to be there, then you might as well just warn it in case it is a majority of us. So if it was planned to be a specific subset that was very small, or just one person, then yeah, you wouldn't need to. But if we want to leave it open-ended and not worry about like scheduling at a time when everyone could come, but just be like, hey, Saturday, anybody who wants to works, and we're going to talk about school, what it's like to be on the school board, then I would think that we should warn that just in case a lot of us come. Plus, it's just one more way of getting the word out.
I like the point about getting the word out. I like that. So,
can I just go back to something I may have, it probably just glossed right over me, but we're still in that conversation. So what decision have we made? Should we just pick a new date and get that so that advertisements can go out immediately with a new deadline? And then we continue to process how we're going to do a meet and greet and encourage people. So we actually come away with something very concrete tonight.
So are you making a motion for a particular date?
Sure.
The date, I can't recall, but was the timing of the due date lined up so that we were in advance of a select board meeting? So do we know when the next select board meetings are?
So my understanding of, looking at the Brattleboro town website in the past, and, it's that, they meet on the first and third Tuesday, and then we of course meet the second and fourth. So, I'm not sure, you had asked some questions about timing, you had emailed me and asked some questions about the timing. So, the question is, or the complications are, we have to receive consultation from the Brattleboro Select Board. If we receive a letter of interest, we have to share it with them. They have to provide their consultation. If we have a meeting at the same time, at some point in time, in the same meeting, whether, like this evening, it would have been, they have a meeting this evening, or had a meeting, I'm not sure if they're done yet, but, and we would have met with them at 7 o'clock this evening because they happen to have had a meeting this evening. I think it's likely, because as I indicated to you, I think it's likely from the holiday. And so, but ordinarily, they would be on the off week, so we wouldn't be able to have consultation with them unless they came to our meeting. And, Robin?
I think that we don't need to meet directly live with them. If we put the deadline in time for them to consider the applicants at their meeting, whatever meeting date that we choose the deadline before that, then they can discuss it and tell us what they thought of everyone, and then we can consider that at our subsequent meeting. We don't have to do it at once.
It was indicated to me that we could receive something in writing from the select board, and that would qualify as consultation. If the Brattleboro Select Board would be willing to talk about it at their meeting and then send something in writing to this board indicating what their response, their suggestion or whatnot, then that would qualify as a consultation. Some of this is it's kind of difficult to really say how we would need to go about doing all this because we don't have a deadline, we don't have somebody having submitted a letter of interest yet. I mean, so some of this is like, we kind of have to work the details if and when we get another letter of interest from it.
Okay, so I think we can't ask for letters of interest without a deadline attached to that.
Oh, no,
so
no,
we've
no.
got to think up the deadline based on when we think everything else is going to be happening, and then we can decide what to do with the letters.
No, we need to give them a deadline to, I was trying to build it in so whoever was, because the candidate would come and address our board and have an opportunity, we could ask questions, they could, if they had wanted to fill in anything about their letter of interest that you can't really, I mean, sometimes in person it's easier to explain things or to go into more detail or whatnot, and then the board can ask questions. So it's kind of the chicken or the egg. Do we have them come and talk, and then do we then say, okay, we'll see you at our next, we'll make a decision at our next meeting after the select board has had the opportunity to kind of view this, and then they will, and then I don't know if I'm explaining it well.
Yeah. So,
but I mean, it's kind of like if we were all in the same room, all at the same time, then we could, because my goal was to have whoever it was, to have them on the board at that meeting. And so it's kind of.
But what I was going to say is, I think that if we just set a deadline of say, for instance, it doesn't have to this, but I'm just trying to make an example. We said, okay, please apply by August 13th. And then we could ask the select board if they had any input on those candidates, discuss it at your August 15th meeting, and then we could invite the person to our August 22nd meeting. and hear the input from the board and from the person and then vote on it at that night.
Do you think that it being vacation might be that might be affecting why we're not getting any?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
September 8th.
I'm sorry?
September 8th. Just throwing a suggestion.
Yeah.
School year started, kids are back at school, interest in the schools is up.
Ruby?
I think the strategic thing that you're trying to do, I see it, but I don't know that it matters if we, if the candidates are going to be discussed in open session at the select board meeting, if there's a desire for those candidates to be introduced here first, then I see what you're saying. Like, we would have to invite the candidates here to talk and then, get consultation from the select board. And from a timing perspective, that select board, the next meeting they have is the 15th, and it's probably going to be a packed meeting because they've skipped a meeting. And so with that in mind, I think that possibly Mark's suggestion of like just, sit on our hands for just a little bit and put a much later due date, and maybe in August, although that for the same reasons is not a great time, but like then we could start thinking about process of how do we let people know what's going on. But and I also it makes me nervous thinking, we're not the select board, and I don't know what's on their agenda. I don't know what their priorities are. If we don't have a hard and fast, we don't have any hard and fast, like we need someone by this date, I think maybe consulting with them about what's the best time for us to hopefully have a candidate and bring to you.
I don't think they will care.
No,
We're not
really
gonna
care.
have a lengthy discussion about this.
Yeah.
You don't even wanna be part of this process.
No.
They're not gonna make a recommendation. They're just gonna say, those people all seem good, good luck with it.
Okay.
They're gonna discuss it for like 2 minutes.
This is.
They'll say, we'll take your recommendation.
Yeah, the meeting tonight, the minutes, it looked like it was 10 minutes that they were
They
allotted for.
And it may be because I asked,
Yes.
I asked the chair to, if they would be willing to, if they would please encourage, at least make mention of it. It was on their agenda, to at least make mention of it and to encourage people to apply. So that might be why it took 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think.
But not much time was being allotted
That was
for discussion.
the agenda,
So-
not the minutes.
No, this was the agenda. They were allotting 10 minutes
Right,
for
allotting 10 minutes,
discussion.
that doesn't mean they spent 10 minutes talking about it.
I think September is a great idea.
I agree.
I had a brilliant idea, I think. I think September is a great idea, and you know how the leadership councils are asking us for direction. I think that might be an opportunity to say, hey, leadership councils, great, new year, wonderful, here's something we really need from you. And so it might make sense to actually have that deadline be later in September to give those leadership councils time to meet maybe and think about within their the Brattleboro community. But I think that would be, they've been asking from before I was appointed to get direction from the board. That would seem like clear direction, at least to the Brattleboro leadership
Okay,
councils.
so just for reference purposes, it looks like the 12th and the 26th would be the days that we would have our meetings.
In September?
In September. So Mark has made the suggestion that we may want it to postpone it until the suggested date of September 8th. Other people have indicated that September is acceptable to them. Is there a motion for a particular date, and if it was in September, what date in September would that be?
I move that we make the deadline September 8th.
I say later in the month.
Okay.
I say later after BUHS Leadership Council is.
Okay, so Robin has made the
Okay.
motion. Is there someone who would like to?
Okay, I rescind my motion. We're just forget that. Jeez. I'm just trying to make something happen.
Do we know when the BUHS Leadership Council will be meeting?
I don't, no, I'm not sure. I think it's September 11th.
Okay. So Tim thinks it's gonna be September 11th. Is there a date?
I mean, there's 5 leadership councils in Brattleboro. So are we gonna guess when all of them are meeting
Good.
and then decide based on that?
I am sure BAMS will not be meeting until the end of September, just based on what the discussion with Keith. Just getting new parents involved. It takes a while
Okay.
with BAMS.
So is there a particular date in September that, Ruby?
What about the 22nd, which would be the Friday before our meeting?
The problem with that is the select board won't be meeting until the 3rd of October.
Well, so we would need to have the candidate come and talk to us before they went to the select board.
Okay.
And then if we had, if the select board was willing to just look at the letter of intent or letters of intent, and just send a written response, or if someone from the select board was willing to come to our meeting, what was challenging about the last time that this happened, there was a holiday, I believe, it was a voting day. And so they had people who were involved in voting day responsibilities, and so they couldn't attend our meeting. And so that's what kind of made that more challenging. But if someone on their board was willing to come to our board and just provide some sort of a response, or if they were willing to provide a written response, then
I don't think one person can really speak on behalf of the whole select board, though.
When I proposed the 22nd, my thinking was that if a candidate produced themselves by the 22nd, they would be given the opportunity to speak at the 26th, and then that would be sent on the October 3rd, and then the next, our first meeting in October, we would appoint. And I think it's important to remember there's a certain amount of wisdom about best practice of appointing when you have an open seat, but open seats are open seats. There's an urgency to get this done, but it's not as if the sky's not going to fall if we don't appoint someone exactly quickly. So to me, that slow, methodical process actually invites public inquiry and public awareness, and that's okay.
That sounds great. I agree with you. Let's go September 22nd and move on.
Deborah, did you have a... Okay. So, is there someone who would like to make a motion?
I move that we extend the deadline to September 22nd.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, so all those in favor of moving the deadline for the submission of a letter of interest to September 22nd, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, and I will note that Anne is out of the room, so for the minutes purposes. Okay, so we will let Mo, we will make her aware that it is September 22nd, and we had some really good discussion on different ways of outreach, and maybe we can come up with a plan for that, a more concrete sort of plan for the different ways of doing that. Robin, did you have
I was just gonna request that by our next meeting that we come with some specific ideas about how if we wanted to do any kind of meetup, that there be, someone has already thought of a date, and let's just not discuss that during the meeting, just tell it and vote it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And so with this in mind, since we're status quo at 9 members, let's remember what the quorum number is. I'm always doing that count whenever I'm talking to someone or sending an email. It's not 4, counting yourself. It's not 5, counting yourself in terms of avoiding quorum, right? So we're down 1. So we just want to make sure that we don't violate open meeting law.
Thanks for work.
Why would it be 5?
4 is below the quorum, she's saying. 5 is a quorum.
Okay, okay.
We can't cut someone in half and make that, okay. So now it looks like we are just on to the 2 executive sessions. One of them is anticipated to be super fast. It's just the board. So, and we will come out because action will be anticipated. Okay. So I will ask if someone would, is there a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, with the understanding that a separate motion will be made to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1A contracts?
So moved.
Sounds like Kim made the motion. Is there a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1A contracts?
So moved.
Okay. So, and all those in favor?
We forgot to vote on the first one.
We did. I just realized that.
Okay,
Yes.
we're fine.
So-
Back to the first motion.
But what we learned at that conference that we attended is we only have to say it once.
But we didn't vote.
Okay, but there were two motions made.
Oh, got
But
it.
some of them you need to
Right.
make you need to make a motion for the finding, and some of them you don't, and I'm just trying to be cautious
Super
and make
careful.
sure that I'm super
Yes.
careful
Amen.
and covering all bases. So I'm jumping back to the finding. All those in favor of making that finding, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. So I think we can already indicate that the motion was made to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1A contracts. And so all those in favor of going into executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. We are now in executive session at 9:12.
And there will or will not?
There will be action. I'm hoping, I know I say this every time, I want 5 minutes.
Yep.
Of executive session at 9:16. And
I move that this board authorize the chair to spend up to $1,500 on a moderator for the board retreat.
thank you, Anne, for that motion. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Please signify by saying nay. Okay, so now we will go back into executive session on this last item. And
Okay. We just came out and I didn't realize Paul had put all these people in the waiting room, so they did not hear the vote.
Oh.
Okay. Do you want us, I can recount what,
Yeah,
Let's bring them in.
Let's bring them in. It wasn't- And Peter wasn't there
I didn't know
either.
what time did we go into?
Recording in progress.
Oh, we went in 5 minutes before. Exactly 5 minutes before.
Okay, so we came back out of executive session at 9:16. It is now 9:17. And the board did vote. We will redo the vote though.
We didn't realize people were in the waiting room.
Okay.
So I move that this board authorize the chair to spend up to $1,500 on a moderator for the board retreat.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, that, for the record, that is the same result as we had before we started recording. So we will we're going to go back into executive session, but there won't be any action anticipated. Is there a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage?
So moved.
Thank you, Kim. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, So now, is there a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1D, grievances other than tax grievances, and 1 VSA 313A1A contracts, and 1 VSA 313A1B labor relations agreements with employees?
So moved.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion? All those in favor of going into executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. We are now in executive session at 9:19 with no action to be taken after.